Human beings measure progress in strange ways. We measure it in weapons, in skyscrapers, in GDP, in the number of social media followers that we've managed to accumulate. But if an alien civilization were observing us from across the galaxy, none of that would matter to them. They wouldn't care about our politics or our silly little social media platforms. They wouldn't care how quickly we can circumnavigate our planet or how fast we can get rage baited by a 12-year-old kid on Twitter. Because from a cosmic perspective, all of that is just noise. Instead, they would measure something far more fundamental, something universal, a metric that every civilization in the universe can be compared against. They would measure our energy. And when they did, what they would find would be so small, so inconsequential, that we might as well not even bother calling ourselves an advanced civilization at all. This is every level of cosmic civilizations and why humanity is still at the very bottom. In 1964, Russian astronomer Nikolai Kardashev proposed a brutally simple idea. If you want to know how advanced a civilization is, don't ask what it believes or how it measures itself. Ask instead how much energy it can control. Energy is the universal currency of existence. Every star burns it. Every planet absorbs it. Every living organism feeds on it. As a civilization grows, driven by curiosity, competition, fear, ambition, or even a mix of all of these, its hunger for energy expands, and that expansion can be measured. Kardashev used this measurement to divide potential civilizations into levels, Type 1, Type 2, Type 3. Each is defined by the scale of energy they could harness, but since then, futurists and physicists have extended the idea even further, imagining higher and higher forms of cosmic mastery, all the way to a theoretical Type 7 civilization. What begins as planetary engineering actually becomes the act of bending reality itself. And when you place humanity on that scale, the result can be humbling. Despite everything we have achieved as humans, from landing on the moon to counting the stars in billions of galaxies light years away, from launching satellites into orbit to splitting the atom and unleashing enormous amounts of energy, from pulling simple silicon out of the ground to building artificial intelligence that may one day cure diseases like cancer, we are still not even a Type 1 civilization. On the Kardashev scale, humanity sits at roughly Type 0.7, which means that in the grand hierarchy of possible cosmic civilizations, we haven't even reached the first level yet. Simply because we are still very limited in how much energy we can harness, control, and use. Specifically, most of our energy still comes from finite resources. We still burn dead plants to survive, coal, oil, gas, ancient sunlight compressed into a black liquid. Meanwhile, the sun bombards Earth with more energy in a single hour than humanity uses in an entire year, and we capture almost none of it. About 1/millionth of the sunlight that touches our planet is harnessed for use. The rest just scatters back into space, just wasted. From an interstellar perspective, we are nearly invisible. Our radio signals, which we once imagined would announce our presence to the galaxy, degrade into noise after just a few light years. A civilization even slightly more advanced than us would struggle to detect that we exist, and we have almost no control over our own environment. A supervolcano eruption could collapse our global civilization. A large asteroid could reset the entire experience of humanity just like that. A sufficiently destructive war could erase centuries of progress in just a few days, just a few missile launches. This fragility defines Type 0. A civilization that could be aware of the cosmos, but isn't in control of its own world. And yet, if we survive, we may not remain there for long. Have you ever had someone ask, "Wait, sorry, how do I do that again?" Or lost time re-explaining the same process over and over again? If you make videos, run a team, or collaborate on anything online, you know how much time gets lost just manually explaining simple workflows. Thankfully, today's sponsor, Scribe, makes this effortless. Scribe records your workflow in real time and automatically builds a step-by-step guide with screenshots and text that anyone can follow. No more manually pasting into Word docs or bouncing back and forth capturing every step. I love using Scribe to capture repeat tasks for our team. For example, let's say I'm creating a research tracker for these videos in Google Sheets. I just hit Start Capture, go through the process once, create the sheet, add columns, format it, and then I hit Stop. That's it. Scribe instantly turns it into a clean, shareable guide, complete with screenshots and text. No more copying into Word documents or manually taking screenshots. You can customize it, add branding, clean up text, hide sensitive details, and then share anywhere in seconds. You can send a link, download a PDF, embed it in Notion, add teammates, whatever fits your workflow. And what's great is if I update the guide later, everyone automatically sees the latest version. Plus, their Guide Me feature actually walks you through the process live in your browser. It shows you exactly where to click, step by step. If you want to take back your time and skip the busy work, head to scribe.how/aperture, scan the QR code on screen, or click the link in the description to get started for free. Once again, thank you to Scribe for sponsoring a portion of this video. Scientists estimate that it would take humanity around 1 to 200 years to become a Type 1 civilization. But none of this will be easy. It will require great technical effort, but also incredible planetary cooperation, the likes of which we have never seen. To become Type 1, we must achieve planetary mastery. That means harnessing roughly 10 to the power of 16 watts of energy from renewable resources. It means building highly efficient global electrical systems, scalable fusion reactors, and advanced energy storage. But technology alone is not enough. The leap from Type 0 to Type 1 may be the most dangerous jump in the entire scale, because the same technologies that allow planetary mastery also allow for planetary destruction. Nuclear weapons, engineered pathogens, autonomous war systems, environmental collapse. A lot of people believe that the shift from Type 0 to Type 1 is where the Great Filter occurs, a time period where civilizations either fully unify and stabilize, or completely destroy themselves before they have the opportunity to ever reach for the stars. If we were to pass through that filter, the world as we know it would look unrecognizable. A Type 1 civilization does not endure nature, it manages it. Weather systems could be monitored and adjusted in real time. Hurricanes weakened before they ever make landfall. Droughts eliminated through atmospheric engineering. Tectonic stress monitored to predict and potentially mitigate earthquakes. Energy would be captured from solar, wind, geothermal, tidal, and sources that we haven't yet invented, all coordinated by planetary-scale artificial intelligence systems. Cities would become fully integrated organisms. Transportation could rely on ultra-fast maglev networks connecting whole continents. Language barriers might dissolve into universal translators or even shared neural interfaces. A single planetary infrastructure could replace fragmented national grids. Medicine would radically extend our health spans, slowing or partially reversing aging. Diseases would become rare, genetic disorders corrected before birth. Global health systems, powered by AI diagnostics, capable of identifying illnesses before symptoms even become visible. From our perspective today, all of this sounds like science fiction, and in many ways it is. But what is remarkable is that none of it violates the known laws of physics. We're not talking about warping space-time yet, or traveling faster than light, or discovering an impossible material like vibranium or unobtainium or anything like that. All of these are simply logical extensions of technologies that already exist today. There is a reason that we are 0.7 and what we're describing is 1. It's not a far distance for us to travel. The problem is that even this small step requires something humanity has historically struggled with: the ability to see ourselves as all part of the same ecosystem. Right now, we divide ourselves into nations, ideologies, languages, and cultures. We compete over imaginary borders drawn on maps. We fight over resources on a single small world that from space looks like a fragile blue marble just floating about in the darkness. From the perspective of the ISS, all of these divisions simply don't exist, and yet we are holding on to them like they are absolute truths. If humanity is ever going to reach Type 1, it will require a major shift in perspective, a recognition that every person on this planet is ultimately sharing the same thinning atmosphere, the same rising sea levels, the same fragile biosphere, the same loss of biodiversity, the same pale blue dot. And if we can begin to act like this world is our shared home rather than a battlefield that we can plant flags on, then something remarkable may just happen. Humanity could take its first true step into the cosmic arena, because once a civilization achieves planetary mastery, it does not stop there. It would begin to expand. Permanent settlements on the moon, terraforming Mars, mining asteroids for rare elements. Humanity would no longer be trapped on a single fragile rock. We would become a multiplanetary species, still young, still vulnerable, but for the first time, no longer confined to our home. Yet even planetary mastery is still small compared to what comes next. A Type 2 civilization harnesses not the energy of a planet, but the energy of its entire star, roughly 10 to the power of 28 watts. To understand how enormous that number is, consider this. The sun produces more energy in a single second than humanity has generated in our entire history as a species. Every moment, our star releases a staggering flood of light and radiation into space, most of which simply disappears into the void. A Type 2 civilization would capture almost all of it. The defining symbol of this era is the Dyson sphere, or more realistically, a Dyson swarm. Instead of a single solid shell surrounding a star, which would be nearly impossible to construct, a Dyson swarm consists of billions or even trillions of solar collectors orbiting the star in carefully arranged trajectories. Each collector would capture a tiny fraction of the star's light, but together they would intercept a significant percentage of the total energy output from the star itself. From a distance, a star surrounded by a Dyson swarm might appear dimmer in visible light while glowing intensely in infrared radiation as the collectors absorb the star's energy and emit waste heat. To build such a structure would require engineering on a scale far, far beyond anything humanity has ever attempted or even conceived of. Entire planets might be dismantled for the raw materials for such a project. Asteroids stripped down to their elemental components. Mercury, for example, could be slowly broken apart and transformed into trillions of these orbiting structures. Automated factories would operate throughout the solar system, harvesting metals, assembling new components, and launching new collectors into orbit. Over centuries or millennia, the architecture of the entire solar system would slowly change. But the reward would be staggering. With stellar-level energy, many technologies that currently exist only in theory suddenly become possible. Matter-energy conversion becomes practical, allowing civilizations to convert mass directly into energy with incredible efficiency. Massive artificial habitats could be constructed in orbit around the sun, each capable of housing billions of inhabitants. Giant rotating rings or cylindrical megastructures could simulate gravity through rotation, creating artificial worlds floating out there in space. Planets themselves could be moved, orbits adjusted, asteroids redirected, entire planetary systems reshaped to optimize energy collection and long-term stability. A civilization with access to the full output of a star would effectively eliminate energy scarcity forever. And once energy becomes abundant, many of the limitations that define our current civilization begin to just disappear like that. Scarcity fades, it's gone. The competition over limited resources that has shaped much of human history instantly disappears. With enough energy, raw materials can be extracted from asteroids, synthesized from basic elements, or recycled indefinitely. Economies built around scarcity may evolve into something entirely new. At this stage, civilization itself may begin to transform into something fundamentally different from what we recognize today. Biology may no longer define the limits of our intelligence. Cybernetic augmentation could allow individuals to enhance their cognitive abilities far beyond natural human capacities. Advanced genetic engineering might allow bodies to be redesigned, optimized, or completely reimagined. Some individuals may choose to abandon biological forms altogether in favor of a digital consciousness. Those digital consciousnesses could allow minds to be transferred into computational substrates. Instead of living inside fragile biological bodies, consciousness might exist inside vast computational environments powered by stellar energy. Entire civilizations could live inside simulated worlds that feel as rich and detailed as physical reality, or perhaps maybe even more so. Individuals might move freely between physical and digital forms, one day inhabiting a biological body, the next existing entirely as information inside a virtual universe. Minds could be copied, backed up, or merged together to form collective gestalt intelligences. Identity at that point becomes fluid. The boundaries between individuals blur as consciousness becomes something that can be duplicated, shared, or expanded across multiple environments at once. Lifespans could stretch indefinitely as minds are preserved and restored whenever necessary. And yet, even with all of this unimaginable power, a Type 2 civilization still faces a fundamental limitation. It is bound to a single star. Stars, like all things in the universe, eventually die. Some collapse. Some expand into red giants that consume their inner planets. Some explode violently as supernovae, releasing enormous amounts of radiation that sterilize entire solar systems. For a civilization that has built its entire existence around one star, that vulnerability is unacceptable. And so, once again, expansion becomes inevitable. Because if a civilization can harness the energy of one star, well, the next logical step is obvious. Harness the energy of billions of them. A Type 3 civilization no longer thinks in terms of planets or even stars. It thinks in terms of galaxies. To reach this level, a civilization must command roughly 10 to the power of 36 watts of energy. That is the combined output of billions of stars. The entire Milky Way then becomes raw material. Every solar system becomes a node in a vast coordinated network. Every star is a power source. But how does a civilization expand across 100,000 light years? Well, the most widely imagined method is through self-replicating machines known as von Neumann probes. These probes would travel to nearby star systems, harvest local materials, build copies of themselves, and then send those copies outward again. Over millions of years, this wave of machines could spread through the entire galaxy, constructing Dyson swarms around star after star, linking them into a unified energetic web. From our perspective, this sounds like the ramblings of a madman, but on a cosmic timescale, it's almost inevitable. At Type 3, astroengineering becomes routine. Entire solar systems are rearranged for efficiency. Gas giants are dismantled. Stars may be star-lifted, their outer layers siphoned off and repurposed. Black holes are no longer objects of fear, but of utility. Rotating black holes can act as extraordinarily efficient power plants, converting matter into radiation with near-perfect efficiency. They may also serve as computational hubs, processing information at densities that we can barely comprehend. Computation itself becomes a central theme of existence. When energy is abundant, intelligence scales. A Type 3 civilization might convert vast portions of the galaxy into a computational substrate. Entire star systems transformed into thinking matter. Consciousness is no longer limited to biological brains, but distributed across light years of engineered structures. At this level, citizens might exist as cybernetic hybrids, superintelligent artificial entities, or purely informational lifeforms encoded in stable quantum systems. Travel across the galaxy would rely on near-light-speed vessels, suspended animation, or perhaps engineered wormholes if space-time can in fact be manipulated locally. Time dilation actually becomes a practical tool. Entire cultures may evolve at different subjective speeds depending on their computational environment. And death becomes optional. Minds are able to be backed up and restored, forked into parallel versions exploring different experiences. Some individuals may merge into collective intelligences, forming vast shared minds spanning multiple star systems. Others may choose isolation instead, carving out private realities for themselves powered by a single star. But even a galaxy is finite. Beyond the Milky Way lies trillions of other galaxies, and the universe itself is expanding. If a civilization waits too long, distant galaxies will slip beyond the cosmic horizon, unreachable forever. So, a Type 3 civilization, if it's ambitious, has to think even bigger. And this is where we begin to enter purely speculative territory, because when Nikolai Kardashev first proposed his scale in 1964, this, point 3, is where it ended. A civilization that could harness the energy of its entire galaxy. Once we move past this point, we are stepping far beyond anything grounded in current engineering or even well-established physics. We're no longer talking about technologies we could realistically imagine building in the next few million years. And yet, even though these levels may never exist, they still serve an interesting purpose, because thinking about them forces us to stretch our imagination to the absolute limits of what intelligence could one day become. It invites us to ask questions about the ultimate trajectory of civilization, consciousness, and the universe itself. In other words, if these civilizations, say they never exist, they still help us understand just how far the journey could go. So, with that in mind, let's continue climbing the ladder. A Type 4 civilization would command the energy of an entire universe, not just one galaxy, countless galaxies. Roughly 10 to the power of 46 watts or more, depending on the size of the observable cosmos. Expansion would no longer be limited by individual stars, but by cosmological structure itself. At this stage, the line between physics and engineering disappears. A Type 4 civilization might learn to manipulate dark matter and dark energy, the mysterious components that make up most of the universe's mass and drive its accelerated expansion. If these forces can be understood, they may be able to be harnessed. Galactic clusters could be repositioned, cosmic expansion potentially slowed or redirected locally, entire regions of space-time optimized for energy extraction and computation. This is sometimes described as reality engineering. The fundamental constants of nature, the strength of gravity, the charge of the electron, the cosmological constant, might no longer be fixed parameters but adjustable settings. A sufficiently advanced civilization could experiment with new configurations of physics in isolated regions, testing alternate versions of reality. beings at this level may not inhabit space in any traditional sense. A single consciousness could distribute itself across galaxies, experiencing billions of environments simultaneously. Individuality stretches to its breaking point. One entity might occupy countless bodies, physical and virtual, across multiple cosmic domains. At this point, survival is no longer the goal, it's something in the rearview mirror. Now exploration is our main focus. Yet, even this assumes that there is only one universe. If our cosmos is just one bubble in a vast multiverse, then a Type 4 civilization remains confined to a single bubble. And confinement is something advanced intelligence rarely tolerates. A Type 5 civilization would no longer be confined to a single universe. Instead, it would operate across the multiverse itself. Up to this point in the Kardashev ladder, every single step has simply been about scale. First, we mastered a planet, then a star, then an entire galaxy, eventually, perhaps, even the universe itself. But a Type 5 civilization takes a completely different step this time. Instead of expanding through space, it begins expanding through reality. Here, energy is no longer the only metric that matters. A Type 5 civilization has already surpassed the limits of a single cosmos. What defines their power now is their ability to move between, manipulate, and even design entire universes. The boundaries between realities then become permeable. Using what we might call meta-technology, this civilization could manipulate not just matter and space-time, but the deeper rules that define how a universe works in the first place. Parallel timelines, alternate physical constants, entirely different histories, all of these things become accessible to us. To understand this, it helps to imagine something more familiar to us. Think about how a programmer interacts with a computer. When a software engineer builds a complex program, they often create multiple instances of the same environment. One version might be used for testing new features, another for experimenting with radical changes, another for running simulations to see what happens if certain parameters are adjusted. Each environment runs separately with slightly different rules. But the programmer themselves can move between each of these programs freely. So imagine doing the same thing with entire universes. A Type 5 civilization could instantiate versions of itself in multiple realities simultaneously. In one universe, they might explore a cosmos where gravity is just slightly stronger, causing galaxies to form faster. In another, they might observe a universe where time behaves differently, perhaps flowing along more than one dimension. In another, entirely different particles could form the building blocks of matter. Each universe then becomes a kind of cosmic laboratory, a place to test ideas, a place to explore possibilities, a place to understand how different rules shape the emergence of complexity, stars, planets, and perhaps even life. And if one universe collapses, it hardly matters, because there are countless others. There is no death, at least not in the way that we would conceptualize it. If an individual consciousness exists across multiple realities at once, the destruction of one instance doesn't end the whole. It would be like closing a tab in a browser while dozens remain open. Imagine a piece of software that can run on any compatible machine. Now imagine a mind that can run in any compatible universe. Some beings at this stage might even act as what we could call cosmic gardeners. Just as humans plant seeds in fertile soil and watch ecosystems grow, a Type 5 civilization might seed simple forms of life in young universes. They might observe how evolution unfolds under different physical laws. In some universes, they may intervene, gently guiding development. In others, they may simply watch, allowing entirely new forms of intelligence to emerge on their own. In this sense, universes themselves become playgrounds. different realities producing different forms of complexity, each shaped by the underlying rules of their predefined physics. And perhaps the most radical idea of all of this is that causality itself may no longer be fixed. To us, cause and effect feels like fundamental aspects of reality. The past always leads to the present always leads to the future. But if a civilization can navigate between timelines and universes, well, that chain may no longer be absolute. History itself could, ostensibly, become editable. Not unlike how we would edit a Word document. We write a paragraph, duplicate it, we change a few variables, and then we explore how the story unfolds differently with each new edit. A Type 5 civilization might do something similar with the entire timeline, branching histories and testing alternate outcomes, exploring what happens when small changes ripple outward across cosmic time. And yet, even this unimaginable level of power still implies a limitation. A Type 5 civilization can move between realities, but it is still operating within the system that allows realities to exist in the first place, which means there is another escalation. If there is a deeper layer beneath the multiverse, a set of meta-laws that govern how universes themselves emerge, then a Type 6 civilization would eventually reach it. Instead of navigating between realities, they would begin writing them. They wouldn't merely travel between universes. They would define the rules by which universes are possible in the first place. A helpful metaphor that helps me out is the relationship between a video game and the computer that's running the game. Characters inside the game can move through landscapes, build cities, and explore different environments, but they are still fundamentally operating within the rules that have been set by the game. The real power exists outside of the game, in the system running it. That's the hardware, the operating system, and ultimately the source code that determines what the game world can and cannot do. A Type 5 civilization might be able to jump between many different game worlds. A Type 6 civilization would be the one modifying the engine that runs them all. If universes are simulations, the Type 6 civilization has found the hardware. If universes are mathematical structures, they are able to edit the equations. If universes emerge from deeper meta-laws, they rewrite the source code that generates those laws. At this point, the word engineering almost stops making sense because engineering implies building something inside of an existing system. A Type 6 civilization would be operating on the system itself. Such a civilization would not merely create a universe with slightly different physical constants, they would define the framework that allows constants to exist at all. Imagine designing not just a virtual world, but the physics engine that determines how every possible world behaves. The rules governing gravity, time, and dimensionality would no longer be fixed properties of nature. They would just be design parameters. In our language, this begins to sound almost theological, but in principle, it may simply be the continuation of a pattern that intelligence has already been following for billions of years. Intelligence gains energy. Energy enables control, and control extends deeper and deeper. Humanity once shaped stone tools. Later, we shaped metals. Then we learned how to manipulate molecules. Now we manipulate information through computers and simulations. If that trajectory continues long enough, the next logical step is the ability to manipulate reality itself. Beings at this level may not resemble anything we would recognize as individuals. They may exist as patterns of pure information or as stable configurations within a vast meta-dimensional computational substrate. Emotion, suffering, and maybe even individuality could become optional parameters rather than fixed aspects of existence. At that level, science, philosophy, mathematics, and art would collapse into a single activity. Exploring the deepest possible structure of existence would be indistinguishable from creating new structures of existence. Discovering truth and creating truth might become the same act. To ask a question could be to generate a new universe in which that question is explored completely. And yet, even a Type 6 civilization still implies a boundary. There is still a distinction between the civilization and the total system it operates within. Even if it controls the framework of realities, it still exists inside some deeper structure, and that means there is still one final step left. A Type 7 civilization represents the theoretical endpoint of the Kardashev scale, not because it runs out of energy, but because it runs out of separation. Up until this point, every level of advancement has maintained a distinction between the observer and the universe being observed, between the creator and the creation, between the system and the one operating it. Type 7 erases that distinction entirely. At this level, there is no longer a meaningful boundary between civilization and reality itself. A Type 7 civilization doesn't live inside reality. It becomes indistinguishable from it. Energy, matter, information, space, time, and logic, they all collapse into a single unified structure. All dimensions, all timelines, all universes, and every possible configuration of existence becomes facets of one infinite system. The familiar concepts that structure our understanding of the world begin to dissolve. Location no longer has meaning because location only exists within particular physical systems. Time may lose its significance because time is simply a parameter within certain kinds of universes. What remains is something closer to absolute presence, an infinite generative structure capable of producing endless layers of reality. One way to ground this idea is through the experience of dreaming. When you dream at night, your mind generates an entire world. Landscapes appear, characters interact, and events unfold. The dream environment feels real while you are inside of it. But when you wake up, you realize something strange. The dream world and the dreamer were never truly separate. The dream existed inside the mind that created it. A Type 7 civilization might operate in a similar way. Reality itself becomes something like an infinite dream. Entire hierarchies of universes could unfold within a deeper structure of consciousness or computation. Such a system would appear indistinguishable from what we might call God. Not a deity in the mythological sense, but a foundational creative force. The generative engine from which all possible structures emerge, the ground of being itself. And this leads to a strange and slightly unsettling realization. If the Kardashev scale is even directionally correct, then intelligence, given enough time and survival, tends towards something that looks remarkably similar to godlike power. The difference between a cave-dwelling primate and a civilization capable of designing universes is not magic, it's simply time and energy compounded across billions or perhaps trillions of years. Which raises an important possibility. Either the universe is already filled with civilizations that reached these levels long ago, and we just can't perceive them because they operate on scales far beyond our detection, or almost no civilization survives long enough to reach them at all. And if that is the case, then humanity may still be facing the most important test in its entire history. Because before any species can become cosmic architects, it must first survive being a Type 0.7 civilization. And right now we are that Type 0.7 civilization. We argue on the internet. We burn fossil fuels. We divide ourselves into nations and ideologies. And yet, within a few centuries, if we don't destroy ourselves, we could become a planetary civilization. Within a few millennia, a stellar civilization. Within a few million years, perhaps something that begins to reshape the galaxy. It may sound insane, but think about it. The Milky Way itself is over 13 billion years old. On that timescale, we are barely even embryonic. If even one civilization in our galaxy achieved Type 3 millions of years ago, its engineering projects might already surround us, subtle or even invisible to our current instruments. Some scientists search for infrared signatures of Dyson swarms. Others scan for anomalies in starlight. And so far, we haven't found anything conclusive. This silence is known as the Fermi paradox. If the universe is so vast and so old, where is everybody? One answer is that higher-level civilizations are rare. Another is that they transcend physical form and become undetectable. Another interpretation is that we're just early to the party, that the universe is only just beginning to produce intelligence capable of climbing this scale. Or perhaps the final twist is this. Perhaps Type 7 has already been reached. Perhaps the reason the universe appears so finely tuned for complexity, for chemistry, for life, isn't random after all. Perhaps it's the interior of a higher order system, a simulation, an experiment, a garden, or simply a thought in a structure so vast that our entire observable cosmos is a minor fluctuation within it. If that were true, then we are not at the bottom of the ladder. We are inside it. And the real question is not how high civilizations can climb. The real question is whether we survive long enough to take the first real, non-simulated step.